morning, this is D, and welcome to Uneven. How's everybody doing today? In case you hadn't noticed, a couple things have changed. And there's my I wanted to get it in right there, right off the bat. I noticed when I edited down these recordings that my see, I just did what I was planning, are often more at the beginning, and then I think I get more into a flow and they kind of fade away, but that's just me. A couple things. One is I am standing. As you might have known, I'm going to stand for this one for a little bit, just something different. So I might, sway a little bit back and forth or kind of, move around. I might even, do a full spin. Who knows, we'll see what happens. But, I see Julie's online and David's been online. So welcome, Julie and David. Thank you both for being here. It's great to see you. And so that's one thing as I'm standing. I'm just trying it out for something different. I like to do things a little different now and then and shake things up. But I got tired of sitting. I have a standing desk. And I set everything up here in my studio so that I can both be sitting and standing, especially when I'm editing or spending a lot of time online or anything like that. It's all where I kind of have to get, up and running. So anyway, it's good for me, right? It's good to be in different positions. But the other thing some of you may not have noticed is since I did the last unevenLive, my office has cleared off my studio. So it is much cleaner now. You can even see down to the nasty carpet and everything and those cords on the ground for my lights. But, and we're still covered the window back there, but we are now, cleaned out. I spent last weekend doing all that and getting all that junk moved to another location in the basement. So trust me, it's not disappeared. It's just relocated. But this now allow me to, I'm going to paint the ceiling is one of the things I'm going to work on. We're going to hang some drapes or some kind of faux walls around here to make it look a little more, like a room and everything. And then we'll put some furniture in, get some nice lighting. It's all part of the process. And we're going to see how that goes. So everybody knows this is unevenLive, which means we are recording it live through our unevenLive community. In fact, I'm going to get a little fancy here. Here we go. There it is. So unevenLive community. See, I can pop up a graphic. Isn't that fun? And so we're coming to you live from that community. Please come check us out. We are still free through the end of January. And we'd love to see you. See, there's the other, but I'm working on those. And so I'd love to have your chats coming in, but this is people that are with our community, all have been invited. And some of them come and actually listen to me record this live. And I love that they're there because they chat with me. They tell me how things are going well and not going well and everything else. So it's great to have everybody on the chat, and thanks for saying hello. And today I wanted to do something a little different. When I was doing the Benzo Free podcast for years, and a lot of my stuff was scripted early on and really well scripted. Not that I'm not saying my scripts were well done. I mean, they were extensively scripted at the beginning. So I had everything I was going to say, just about everything I say written out. And then over time, they became a little more improv and not written out as well. And I found a lot of those were actually even better received than the ones I scripted. When I launched the Uneven podcast, 60 episodes ago or something? My God, I've been doing this for a while. I'm going to throw them all out there right now, so I won't have any more now because I just threw them out there. But when I launched this, I wanted to be a little more raw, a little more just real. Authentic is getting overused, so I try not to use that term. But just me, nothing fancy. And I think that's what connects with people, and that's what works on our site. That's what works when we're chatting on our site and talking back and forth. And I think that type of communication is really good. And so today I just had this thought, rather than something I'd written out, and I can still go do that. I have some things we can talk about and might still approach, but I decided to, just in my brain, I thought, let's just take topics from the chat room. We got some people in the chat room, and take a topic, any topic, and I'll just start talking on it. And if you have something else you want to add about that topic, feel free. It can even be anonymous. If you're in the chat room and you don't want to use your name because you posted a topic, just say ANON at the beginning or something, and I'll know not to mention your name. But I think that would be great just to kind of see, let's just go and tackle a subject and see what happens. So I'm going to put this up there. So the question is, today is, here's the title for it. It is Free for All Friday. on a Thursday because I had this in my brain this morning in the shower. I thought, wouldn't it be cool to kind of have free for all Fridays, which is just this time, a free for all something where we don't know what we're doing yet. And we're going to see where our live stream takes us. And it's going to be up to you all and other things we think about. And so basically, I'm going to ask the group of what topic should we talk about? So post those on the chat room. And I'll be jumping back to the chat room in a second. And I'm going to look for those things. And we'll just start to talk about different topics. It can be related to anxiety, it can be related to medication, it can be related to life, anything. And we'll take a look and see what we got. I'm just kind of curious. So I'm going to go back to the chat room now and see all the great ideas. I do see that Mark has joined. And thank you, Mark. Great to see you. Great to see everybody. So anybody want to post anything that you want to chat about? Anything that's been going on, do that. Otherwise, I'm going to stay here and just toss this koosh ball, up in the air. For those who are on audio only, I have my koosh ball here in my hand. This has become a topic. In fact, I'll ramble about this for a second because I think I might have mentioned it on a previous podcast, but I have this koosh ball. It is a device. It became a device for me. When we're on these calls on unevenLive, we're often talking about serious subjects and we're really trying to listen to each other and everything like that. And Mark did pipe in. Great. Mark gave me a suggestion. I'm going to tackle that in a second, Mark. Thank you so much. But a lot of us, we've noticed as we're on these calls, are also doing something else. Some of us are, doing some kind of craft or art. For me, I have this koosh ball and I toss it in my hand. It actually helps me focus. It helps me be more focused with the people in the room and focused on what's going on. But I didn't even notice I was doing it. I found this when I was cleaning out the basement. It wound up on my desk, and then I noticed I'm starting to play with it. And I play with it. I think it's part of my ADHD. I think it's part of my anxiety, but I do that, and I'm doing it right now a little bit too. So there's my koosh ball. For those who don't know what koosh balls are, it is definitely dates me, but they were huge, I think, in the 90s or something. I don't know. And they kind of took off 90s, maybe early 2000s, but that was it. Mark wrote in, and Mark wanted to mention that. Actually, this is a really good one. I'm glad you brought that up, Mark, because this is one of the things we run into all the time. Many of you, I know, are isolated. Many people, period, are isolated right now. And actually, this was on the news just a couple days ago, and I'm going to get it wrong, but the gist of it was the number one, not even just mental health threat, but the number one threat to people's overall health was loneliness. And I think it was overall, not just even mental health, but loneliness. It might have been mental health, but it was the number one. And I wasn't surprised. I wasn't surprised by that. I'm dealing with a little bit of it now, but this is so minor compared to what some of you deal with. My wife's out of town for 2 weeks. She went down to Mesa, Arizona with her mother. Most of you know that my wife lost her dad last year, and they used to winter in Mesa. They have a little single wide trailer down there in an RV park, and they would go down and spend a few months each year down there. And so this is the first time for her to return without my father-in-law, and so my wife drove down with her mom to go down and do that. Long story short, I'm running solo with just Murphy and me. Thankfully, I have Murphy, and he keeps me company. But usually when I'm separated from my wife, it's rough for a couple days. And I know this is nothing like people who are chronically alone, but I'm just trying to compare it a little bit to what I go through. Because even if we have people around us, we still deal with loneliness. This is one of the things that is common. You can be in a room full of people and be very alone. Actually, Mark mentioned that he has his dog. Is it Kayla? Yeah, Kayla as well. Sorry, I took my glasses off to avoid the glare of the light, which means then I have to really kind of move in close to read the comments on the screen sometimes. But I think we all understand this. And unfortunately, our current society has not been very helpful. We're more connected digitally than we've ever been in our lives. We're more connected to multiple people than we've ever been, I think, in the history of humankind. But we've become less connected to true friends, to true relationships, to intimately with people. And And that does seem to be pervasive. I've been seeing that a lot, not just on our support group that I work through, but also through the podcast. So many people would write in, people going through withdrawal, like benzo withdrawal, like antidepressant withdrawal, people going through severe anxiety states, PTSD, panic attacks and stuff, and having literally nobody there to support them. And my heart definitely goes out to those people, because loneliness is one of those holes. I think of it as a hole. I don't know who else does that, but a hole in my heart or in my body somewhere. I know this is visualization that may not make sense, but I don't know if it's my upbringing. I had some difficulties, childhood, of course, we all did, but I don't know where it comes from. But loneliness is probably my greatest fear. I'll be honest. It's probably my greatest fear. I don't like being alone. And yet I also sometimes thrive and really need to be alone. So I have this introverted nature where I need time, but I don't want to, how's the way to put this? I don't want to be alone, involuntarily and on an ongoing basis. I like having people around. I'm pretty social, even though I do re-energize myself in an introverted fashion. And I'm very independent on things sometimes, on road trips and stuff like that. And I seek that out sometimes. I'm okay with that because I always know I have a support system. I have something to fall back on. I'm not truly alone. I have a wife I talk to every night, even when I'm on the road. I have extended family. I have people I can go visit. I have my friends here at Uneven that I can talk to. And some of them have already reached out to me and said, I know you're solo for the week or two. Give me a call or talk with me. And that's been huge. It's been huge that people are doing that. Yeah, so I got another topic from Julie. We'll tackle that in a second. So this is kind of fun. Sorry. I don't mean to belittle anything, but that all brings us to, I think we understand loneliness. And of course, this is me just spitballing because I didn't prep for this. What do we do about it? There's the question. What do we do about it? I think Mark's primary thing was, what do we do about this loneliness? How do we deal with it? How do we handle it? And I think I'm spitballing here, but I think we do some things wrong. I was blessed to have found a partner 28 or 30 years ago and stick with that person for a long time, and I'm very grateful. That has been probably the number one thing I've done right. Smartest decision I ever made was marrying my wife, and I'm very grateful for that. But I also was lucky. I also was blessed to have found that person and to have been able to stay with that person. It wasn't all luck. It wasn't all being blessed. It was also work and realizing the importance of it and working at it to maintain it. But I'm blessed. But that's not the only thing. There are relationships all over the place. We do seem very isolated. The pandemic did not help at all. It really isolated people. Some people were completely alone and had no personal contact. And our world has shifted, and I don't know that it's for the best. But when it has, how do you find those people? I know people who are looking for love in their life. I don't even know where to start right now. I can't imagine what it would be out there right now trying to date with all the complications, with dating apps, with what's the right term for it? Just the male, female, and doesn't matter your sexual preference, male, female, whatever, but the dynamics, all the dynamics that have shifted with politics and everything else. It's so much different than when I first was dating. It's so much more complicated, I think. I feel like we are almost intentionally, maybe not intentionally, but putting barriers up to finding connection. And yet we all know that an infant, even when given food, water, shelter, and all the basic necessities, will die without affection. And as we've aged, that hasn't necessarily changed. We all need that. We all need to be able to find that. But we've also put up all these walls about rules about how you can find that in the world. As I ramble on with probably no end in sight, but I wish I had the answer. I wish I had the answer. I'm not about to stand here and tell you I know how to cure loneliness, because I don't. All I know is this simply is it takes work. I have a gap on my friend basis, and I'll admit this. My closest friend is still from back in my college days. My closest friends are still back from high school and college, and they're back in Kansas City. Since I've been out here for over 25 years in Colorado, I have made almost no really close friends. And I realized that was on me. I didn't work at it. I don't know how to. I'm a little awkward in that regard. Maybe it doesn't seem like that. I do a podcast, so why am I awkward? But I am. I don't know how to do that. And I'm not sure. I'm always having this fear of being where I'm not wanted. I'm always trying to please people, and it's always complicated. So, anyway, I wish I had an answer. It's a great topic to talk about, and I'm always welcome to get some input on it. But I do think we need to address it, because I think this is an epidemic. Loneliness is an epidemic right now, and we're not paying enough attention to it. I have seen it over the last several years working through the podcast repeatedly, and especially people who have had that base, that relationship base in spouse or family, and have lost it. And that's really tragic, either due to the condition they are in from medication or something, or for some other reasons. I'm very empathetic, and my heart goes out to those people. I don't have the answer, but this is something I'm going to think about, and I'm going to come back. I'm going to come back on this podcast, and we'll talk more about this later. But thank you, Mark. Thank you. There have been some more comments that have come in. So actually, Julie brought up the topic about antibiotics and other medications, and we're talking about, especially coming off a medication like benzodiazepines, antidepressants, and that kind of thing. We have seen a lot of people having complications from other medications, and this has been a topic we talk about a lot on Uneven. And I get the fear. I've had it. I've had several procedures over the last few years, and I had to decide, do I take a benzo? Do I not take a benzo? Is an antibiotic going to complicate things? Is this drug, is propofol, which they give for an anesthesia, is that going to cause problems? And some people have had complications. It's not knowing. This stuff is crazy, because we don't really know what's going to set us off. And that can drive us nuts. Antibiotics appear to sometimes create setbacks for people, appear to sometimes create complications for people, especially people who have been hypersensitized due to long-term use of a benzodiazepine, antidepressant, GABAergic drug, one of these medications. And we have seen that. But I've also seen pretty consistently it's temporal, it's limited, and that most of the time when we have a setback from antibiotics, it usually is short-lived, and it does seem to reset itself. I don't see it as being a long-term thing for most people. I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but I haven't seen that as being a long-term thing for most people. But we do need antibiotics sometimes. And we have, of course, overprescribed those in the past, and that's created a lot of problems on its own. But they are also lifesavers, and it's really good to have those. Oh, fluoroquinolones. Thank you, Mark, for mentioning that. On the antibiotics topic, fluoroquinolones is a big one. I can speak to this gladly because I am one of those lucky few who took a fluoroquinolone coming off of Klonopin. So the deal with fluoroquinolones or quinolones, they are a class of antibiotic, and they actually have a black box warning from the FDA. Because they can cause neuropathy. This is not necessarily tied to benzos or coming off any other medication. Just on their own, fluoroquinolones do have a box warning about possible neuropathy. Well, so do coming off benzos, so does everything else can cause neuropathy. So, of course, it just makes sense these don't mix. This is one of the few things that Professor Heather Ashton actually mentioned in the Ashton Manual about. That was one of the few medications she really warned about was fluoroquinolones. To be careful not to take that drug, especially when you're taking benzos or coming off of benzos. I didn't remember that when I got prescribed that for a misdiagnosis of prostatitis. And I took the fluoroquinolone, and it was later that I looked back and realized that wasn't very good. And is that possibly the reason why I've had protracted neuropathy for so long? Yeah, it very well could be a factor. because I was already sensitized through benzodiazepines. So it's one thing to avoid, and usually you can work around this. Cipro is a perfect example of a fluoroquinolone. There's other ones too, but it's good to know the drugs that might be more complicated, other antibiotics, other medications. Not to not take them necessarily, and I would never give you advice not to take a medication that's prescribed by a physician. I can't do that. I'm not a medical professional. I need to make sure I always say that. But to work with your doctor. There's often alternatives. There's often other things. And to say, look, I'm concerned about this, or I don't believe I can take this because of this. To mention to your physician and say, what are my other options? Is there something else I can take? With antibiotics, there's usually another type of antibiotic if they're originally prescribed you a fluoroquinolone. And maybe the antibiotic isn't necessary, but that's something for you to have that conversation with your doctor about. Again, sometimes antibiotics are absolutely necessary. So just be careful and work with your physician on those things. That's the best thing to do. But fluoroquinolones are tricky, and it's one of those things that can be difficult. So Mark also mentioned something at the end here, which is loss and grief, which is a great one. Maybe we'll kind of wrap up with this one, because loss and grief, going through all that we're going through. And of course, most of the people on our site right now are usually medicated or post-medicated, meaning they have had complications with medication, typically benzodiazepines, antidepressants, something else, and are coming off them. And we also have life complications that happen during this time. It's not always just the medication, but there is a factor. One of the spaces we have on our community at, where is it? Uneven.live. Very good, at Uneven. So please go check it out. One of the spaces we have there that I created from the scratch was grief. I'll admit part of this is because this is something I've gone through a lot, and there's two aspects to grief that we are approaching it from. One is the loss of someone, the loss of someone in your life. For me, I lost 7 people plus a dog in a period of 3 years, very close to me, including 2 parents, 2 cousins to COVID, a close friend. I had a lot of loss, and I'm still trying to figure out, I think, how to deal with that. I'm still working through that. So that is one aspect of grief. And that can really complicate things, especially when you're already hypersensitized, when your system is hypersensitized. Any stressor makes things a little more complicated. But there's a second aspect. This might be what Mark is kind of referring to, and that is the loss. And this is huge in our community. It's the loss of the life that you had or you thought you should have. For so many of us, and this is one I can see these are great topics, because this is one I can talk for hours on, Mark, if you wanted me to. But our lives have been altered, and 98% of the time through no desire of our own. It wasn't something we meant to do. This was a complication from a medication for many of us. Sometimes it's a complication from trauma. Sometimes it's a complication from psychological disorder or something. But regardless, our lives have been altered. And the life that we thought we were going to live, the life we thought we were living, a life we were living, is suddenly taken away from us. And sometimes slowly taken away from us, which might not be any better. And we have to deal with that. That's a huge aspect. That's why I often talk about the 5 stages of grief with people I work with, because it's about that type of thing. It's about grieving and grieving that loss of our life. And for those that don't remember, the 5 stages of grief from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's original book was, I'm going to get this right this time. I know I am. Denial, bargaining, anger, depression, and finally acceptance. And acceptance is the one thing that I have seen transform people's attitude and situation, especially coming off these drugs. But it's not something you can force. We all have our own process. And these 5 stages of grief are not necessarily linear, and not everybody goes through all stages. These are just the possibilities of what we might go through. But I've seen it so often. I've seen so often people getting caught in anger just because they're so mad this has happened to them, but they can't move past it. They just can't get past this anger, and that's engulfing them. And they have to process that. We can help a little bit, but they have to process that and find their way through. Bargaining, I'd done that. It's like, well, if I just suddenly ate completely right, all this would go away. Or if I just suddenly started exercising extremely, in of a high level, it would all be fine. Or if I just, prayed, or if I just, I'm finding anything to take this away from us. And depression, that's just permeates the whole thing. And of course, denial is the first one. This can't be happening to me. And I think we all deal with that too. But acceptance is the one place where I think we start to turn the corner. And that's why I like to talk about acceptance a lot, because with grief, especially, it's very difficult to move on until we've finally fully accepted this has happened. Now what? And not from a place of anger, not from a place of frustration, not from a place of bargaining or anything else or denial, but from a place of, okay, I'm here. I need to now make the best of this situation. For some of us coming off these medications, this has been just an overwhelming tsunami of change in our life, and it's very hard to adapt. And we have to figure that out. And the problem with acceptance, like I said, is reaching that fifth stage, and that's typically the final stage, is it's not something we can force, even ourselves, and it's not something other people we can force on us. You can do things, you can do practices. There are some techniques you can use to help you process through this. There are several books that help with this type of thing. So there's a lot of resources out there. But eventually, most of us reach acceptance. And when you've reached acceptance, now you're realizing this is my life now. You can let go of some of the anger and frustration and some of that, even some of the depression. All the depression seems to kind of stick with you for a while. And you can say, what now can I do to get through this? What now can I do to make the most of it? What can I do with my time so that when I do get out on the other side, maybe I've learned something. Maybe I've picked something up. A lot of people that take on crafts or take on a language or take on something, a lot of us have a lot of time on our hands. Several of us have lost jobs. Several of us have lost so many things, and we're left, just like Mark had mentioned, with loneliness, and we're left with time. What are we doing with that time? I decided to dive into research like crazy, write a book about it, launch a couple podcasts about it, launch support sites about it, and now launch an online community about it. That's what I did with my time. And it has been overwhelming, but it's also been a positive because I've helped people, but also just for me, it has given me a purpose, a focus. And I think even more important than just keeping busy is finding that purpose. We lose our purpose a lot when we go through something like this, and we find ourselves wandering in misery, not knowing when to turn left or right, not knowing which way is forward. And I think finding direction, even if it's a small direction to start with, is really important. Where's that next step? What's that next direction? Anyway, thanks, Mark. That was a fun topic. Don't know if I covered everything very well or not. I just wanted to touch on it, but I think that was a good topic to talk about. Talk about loneliness, talk about grief, talk about what all people are going through. The primary thing for all this, for the loneliness and all of it, I think is connection. I think it's connection. And I think connecting with other people here at our community, with other support groups, finding places you connect with people maybe of similar mindset, of different mindset, but finding ways to reach out to people and start those connections. And those connections online can lead to direct connections sometimes too. And that's one thing we're going to start doing. And Julie just mentioned that. So Julie, I'm going to answer your question because it kind of feeds on the loneliness thing. I mentioned how most of our communications are digital right now. And even though that does allow us to reach a lot of people of all different cultures, locations, I mean, there's some great aspects to it. It also doesn't typically lead to a lot of great intimate conversation or intimacy developing with another person. That is more of a one-on-one, eye-to-eye, face-to-face kind of communication. But it can. It can help that, and it can lead to that, where it's where meetups are and different groups that people have done throughout the country and throughout the world. Juliet mentioned, are you planning any road trips? Oh, and that is a good question. I am going to answer that question. So there. Right now, I have no plans, and part of that is my limitations. I had a lot of nerve pain this year, and extreme foot pain, leg pain, and I'm doing significantly better right now. But I'm also trying to manage that. One of the problems with it is it seemed like being in the car, and it could be driving and it's even riding, exacerbated that condition, and still does. Not as bad, but it still does. I'm still trying to figure out exactly what about the car. I think it's the position of my body and my foot, especially like when you're hitting the gas pedal. And something in there is tugging at some tendon, which is aggravating some nerve or something. And until I kind of resolve that or figure a way around it, it's hard for me to drive more than an hour in the car. And so that's been limiting me on where I can go road trips. And I love road trips. And I definitely plan to do one this year because that's something I really want to do. One of my goals is to head back east. I know a lot of you folks out there are back east. And I'd really like to head back east. I also have some relatives out there. The two members of our leadership team, Rachel and Lisa, are both back east. So I'd love to go out there, maybe do a meetup, maybe do some kind of thing where we can start to get people together, pop by, talk to different people in different places of the country. This was always a vision of mine for this type of community. And I'm really hoping to do more and more on the road. I'm not worried this will never happen for me because of the pain or something. I know I'm going to get through this. I know this is going to get beyond me. I know I'm going to get past it. And I know this for one reason. I'm not going to let it. I'm not going to let it. I'm going to find a way to work around it. I'm just trying to figure out the logistics of how exactly it's happening so I can learn to avoid it. And I have some, but I'm not letting it stop me. And I've had that attitude somewhat throughout my recovery from Klonopin, from benzodiazepines, is that I'm not going to let it stop me. And I was really down, really dark, very bad places when I first came off of Klonopin. But I always had this drive that I'm going to keep moving forward and I'm going to keep finding a way out. Michael said, good for you. Thank you, Michael. It's good to see you on the call. Then I'm going to keep moving forward. And it's one of those things where we have to have some of that spirit. We have to have some of that drive because it takes that type of mentality, I think, to get through all this. So I am excited to get out there and meet people. In fact, Michael piped in, and Michael's one of the people that I promised I would stop by and see at some point, and I would love that too. Rachel mentioned that would be fun, meeting one another. Oh, thank you. So I can visit. Oh, that's right. I've got some people in northern Alabama. One of the things I thought I might do is coming out of Colorado is, go out northern and come back southern. And that way I'm going to hit, some different areas and stuff like that. And definitely got to hit Alabama. I got some really great people out there, and I'm starting to shake up a little bit. Okay, so my video is shaking. If your video is kind of jumping, don't worry about it. Check us out at uneven.live. We would love to see you over there. And I'm going to wrap this up. So thanks, everybody. And thanks for attending. And thanks for just hanging in there and being part of our community. Talk to you soon. Bye. Hey, this is Dee. Thank you so much for stopping by and checking out our podcast. I do need to remind everyone that this podcast is for informational purposes only and should never be considered medical, psychological, or professional health advice of any kind. If you or someone you know is dealing with significant mental health issues, please seek professional help. Resources can be found in our show notes and on our website at unevenpodcast.com. Take care of yourself, and I'll catch you on the flip side.